Okay, today we're going to be chatting about the 361 Degrees Miro Nude, which is one of the lightest racing shoes on the market. Certainly one of the lightest that I've owned, 120 grams on my men's size 10.5, but we still get that nice super shoe feel underfoot. So I've used this for 2 sessions now and a 5K race, getting back into the winter season. Wanted to share my thoughts on it now rather than later, because unfortunately I don't think it's going to last all that long. So we're going to run through it as always, top to bottom, chat about the price point, a few comparisons, and get to the bottom of whether this is something that you should look to try out. A little bit of context around 361 Degrees is that they are a competitive Chinese running shoe brand. They have a pretty extensive lineup of racing and training shoes. I've personally tried out a couple. So we've got shoes like the Flame 3, the Furious 2, and then the Furious Future. I've been pretty impressed with all of these shoes, with some high quality foams, good fitting uppers, grippy outsoles that last a good deal of miles. So far, I've been really impressed with 361 Degrees. They have a very extensive racing shoe lineup as well. So although I've tried 3 of their models, I would say there's probably about another 9 or 10 shoes that I still haven't tried, which are used for track running and speed sessions and speed training in general, just a lot of different shoes. The Miro Nude though is sitting up top of all of those racing shoes as the lightest, most stripped down as a kind of Evo Pro 1 competitor. Yeah, very exciting to see this coming from a Chinese brand with a pretty good body of work behind them as well. Don't let that be mistaken. Starting off with a few specs before we get into it, this is coming in at 120 grams in my men's size 10.5, which means that it's nearly half the weight of some other super shoes on the market right now. We've got a slightly lower stack height than the 40mm limit, 36 in the heel with a 9mm drop down to 27 in the forefoot, which is a little bit unusual. Usually we'll see a 4 or 5mm drop, so that brands can cram a little bit more foam up into the forefoot to give it a bit more protection, even if some of the other foam has kind of been stripped away. But 9mm here, I don't think feels too different from the other racing shoes, maybe to do with the foam. The foam itself is a supercritical PEBA, very lightweight, quite resilient, I would say. It's not firm, but it does have a good little bit of bounce back with a good deal of compression as well. So I would say this feels like a slightly softer version of the original Zoom X, a little bit more compliant, a little bit more kind of smooth through your stride. We've got a carbon plate in here as well, full length, but it is a little bit more flexible than some other racing shoes out there. But I do think that it is tuned quite nicely for this racing shoe with the foam, with the geometry. I think it all comes together quite nicely. So don't get worried about the flexibility. It is still a fast, aggressive racing shoe, just a little bit more tuned for what the foam is going to do as well. Starting off with the upper, it is very stripped down. Not a whole lot to talk about here really. The material is extremely breathable, very, very flexible. A little bit of padding in and around the heel counter, but otherwise completely unstructured. I found the lockdown to be very secure in the heel and in the midfoot. Maybe a little bit because it is quite a dialed in fit through that midfoot area, quite snug, super shoe fit for sure. I found the lockdown to be good. Found the fit to be maybe a little bit longer than true to size. So I float size 10, 10.5, 10.5 for most Western brands, but for 361 Degrees and a few other Chinese brands, I found the toe box room to be a little bit extra than what I need. So I went for a size 10 here, and I think it's worked out well. I've got a secure fit through the midfoot, little bit of room ahead of the toe box. I wouldn't have gone the 10.5. I think that this has worked out quite well. The one thing I would say though is if you haven't had experience in Chinese racing shoes, it's probably a good idea to go true to size. I think that you're still going to get a good lockdown. Can't hurt to have any room ahead of the toes. But if you're more confident in the fact that you can go the half size down sometimes, and you might, appreciate a little bit more of a dialed in fit, then feel free to go the half size down. I think it does fit a little bit longer. Overall, lightweight upper, stripped down, no blisters, no niggles. I think that's always a good thing about these really flexible uppers, that they just kind of go with your foot. The one small complaint I have is that the tongue is just a little bit unruly. I would like to see it stitched in up to these first 3 eyelets here to stop it from folding in under itself when you put your foot into the shoe. Other than that, it's pretty much perfect. Really happy with the upper. Moving down to the midsole, this is obviously where most of the magic is coming from. Super compliant, smooth PEBA foam with a semi-flexible carbon plate gives one of the best running experiences that I've had, full stop. 5 and 10K pace, this is an absolute dream. Disappears underfoot. It feels like you're running around barefoot, but with the nice, smooth, efficient propulsion of a modern day super shoe. It's definitely not as propulsive as an Alpha Fly or a Wave Rebellion Pro 3 or an Adios Pro 4. It's not that kind of big, booming rocket ship underfoot. It's this kind of more smooth, silent, fun feeling shoe underfoot where you just kind of forget that you're wearing it, which, as I've said with the Dynafish Downey 1, is one of the best compliments that you can give a super shoe these days, because it just doesn't really feel like it's there. It's not demanding your attention, and you can kind of just focus on running, which is fun. It's really nice to just kind of connect with the road, kind of focus on your stride rather than being too concerned about what the shoe is doing underfoot. I think some people will be a bit concerned that this will feel a bit too minimal or a bit flat. I would say that it does have a good deal of protection for a shoe which is so light, and for a shoe which is, you know, so stripped down around the midsole. The compression is not going to be kind of distributed out. You're not going to be getting that kind of big long range marathon racing shoe, but it definitely isn't a kind of minimal, harsh flat. It does have a good deal of guts to it. The sink in and rebound is enough to keep you comfortable. I don't think you need to be worried about this being harsh. I do think the 9mm drop is interesting. I do think it is actually warranted here. I think mainly down to the compression of this foam. I think if you had a 4 or 5mm drop and you had the softness of this foam, if you were to land further back in the shoe and compress the heel, you would end up with a nearly negative drop. So I think that they've done that strategically so that even if you land in the midfoot and the foam does compress down as you go, there's still a little bit of a kind of pitch forward to keep you moving through the shoe and make sure that you don't get lost in the softness of this foam. It's not the softest foam out there, don't get me wrong. It's nowhere near as soft as an Endorphin Elite, so don't get concerned, but it is, with such a kind of small midsole base underfoot, I do think it's not going to be the most kind of gutsy and resilient to compression. So I think it is wise to have the 9mm heel pitch to keep things moving. As I mentioned, 5 and 10K pace for me seems to be the best place to use this shoe, not only because it is extremely fast and easy to turn over, but also because I think in terms of the durability of this shoe, it's probably going to be a better use of your time and money to use this for a 5 and 10K where you can get a couple of goes, whereas if you take this to the half and full marathon, I think over those distances the foam will compress down a bit and you might not have as good of a time. But I also think in terms of the overall longevity, yeah, it's not going to get you too many races of those longer distances. So 5 and 10K pace for me, and 5 and 10K racing makes the most sense. That's what I would recommend it for. Doesn't feel uncomfortable for half and full marathon reps if you're using it for training. But yeah, in terms of everything else, 5 and 10K seems to be the sweet spot. Really, really enjoyed this shoe. One of the best running experiences that I've had. Used it in a 5K race, getting back into things as winter approaches. Absolutely loved it. It stuck with me to the very end as well. It didn't bottom out or die away. It still had my back in that final kind of 500-meter sprint to really pick up the pace. It is a truly awesome experience. Moving down to the outsole, the rubber, quick mention, has actually been holding up quite well. I found the grip to be good, even on some dusty floors running through the Freo Ports course where you're running through a few warehouses as a bit of a detour. Grip's been fine, hasn't been raining, can't really speak to that. And I think the durability of the rubber, this CPU rubber, should actually be pretty good. The one thing that is going to hold this shoe back though, unfortunately, is the midsole durability. Outsole is going to be fine. I think the midsole is going to go well before that. So this soft foam has been taking an absolute beating from me, landing on that outside edge, supinating quite hard on some of those faster reps. You can see it here. You can see it on the other shoe as well. Yeah, it's copping an absolute beating, both on the unprotected areas, but also on that outside edge where the rubber is actually covering the foam. I don't know whether you can see that on camera. It's kind of indented down, like the foam has collapsed away. It's almost like the bubbles have popped, they've lost their air, or they're kind of ripped and torn, and it is starting to fall away. I can push my finger down into this kind of crevice, this little hole. I can feel the carbon plate almost directly. That does have me worried for the future durability of this shoe. This is after 25Ks as well. 2 sessions, 1 race. It's not a lot of running to be seeing damage like this. I do think there is going to be a point where you have to say enough's enough and say that a shoe is just probably not worth it. It's probably going to be pushing it in terms of value for money, in terms of longevity, how many runs you get out of it. But there is also going to be a point where you have to consider your environmental impact in terms of burning through a pair of shoes just so that you can have a good running experience. I think for me personally, I'm not going to tell you what you need to do in terms of purchasing, but for me personally, I probably wouldn't be going for another shoe like this if I know that it's going to fall apart this quickly. I think I'd rather go for something which is slightly heavier, maybe a little bit bulkier, but is going to give me a similar experience but last a bit longer. I think I feel more comfortable with that. If I had to put a prediction on how long I'm going to get out of this shoe, I would say I'm going to be looking for about 80 or 90 Ks, and I will definitely put that to the test. I'm going to take this and run it into the ground so that you know for sure what to expect. Obviously, you can probably extend the life of it if you used it for grass reps on the track or, you know, softer surfaces, something like that. But yeah, 25 Ks, not great, definitely plays into the value and also overall sustainability and what you think a shoe should last for. Coming around to the price point here in Australia, there's two main answers that I can give. The first being that this costs $350 to $380 off AliExpress, which is a bit more secure, easy to navigate, English speaking, that's great. I don't think it's worth that. I think that the durability definitely holds it back. At that rate, you're going to be probably wearing it for about $4 per kilometer, $4 or $5 per kilometer, which is just ridiculous. It's good, but it's not that good. On the other hand, you've got Taobao, where you can find this shoe for around 160 Australian dollars plus shipping, which is obviously going to come with a few challenges like navigating it, finding it, obviously security, everything like that. But if you trust it and you can find it on Taobao, that would be the place to go. Obviously, again, environmental impact, whether $160 is worth it when it's going to fall apart this quickly, it's going to be completely up to you. But two very different answers, two very different ways of looking at it, I suppose. So it kind of falls into a bit of a weird spot for me where I would never recommend this to someone for $350, but even for $160, I think that you can just buy better shoes which are going to last a little bit longer, going to give you a pretty fun experience, but they're just going to stick around. I do enjoy a running experience like this, but part of the fun of a racing shoe for me is the fact that you can kind of get to know it, you get used to it, you get comfortable with it, and you can kind of adapt your stride to really work well with the shoe. You get that familiarity, you know what it's going to feel like at the end of a race. And with the Miro Nude, I feel like I've barely scratched the surface and it's already falling apart. And so for that, I'm just not really sure that I can recommend it wholeheartedly despite how much fun I've had in it. Getting into a couple of comparisons to round this review out, there's a few which I want to rush through. 3 Chinese hyper shoes which I've been wearing over the past couple of months. First one is the Dynafish Danyon 1, which is taking off around the running community. This is from a brand which is started out of one of the Chinese factories. Very exciting stuff. 150 Australian dollars off AliExpress, even cheaper on Taobao. We've got a bit more resilience in the foam, a bit more bulk to the midsole, so a bit more stability, a bit more structure. We've got a supercritical Pebax TPU kind of liner sitting on top of a 4-foot shank. This is much more of a kind of smooth, controlled ride, a little bit less bouncy and smooth and kind of efficient feeling than the Miro Nude, but certainly for its durability, this has got 50 Ks on it, doesn't look like it's been worn. For its durability, for its value, I think that this is a much better option as a kind of taste tester of a hyper shoe in the current market. The one thing that I need to point out though, is that it does have a very narrow fit, especially through this midfoot area. I would watch my review on this shoe if you can, just to work out whether this shoe is going to be a good fit in terms of the sizing. It's probably going to be the one thing holding it back. So I really enjoyed the Miro Nude. I probably enjoyed this more for the 5 and 10K pace. But as an actual product, as an actual shoe to buy, I still would recommend the Dynafish Danyon 1 over the Miro Nude. Then we've got the Chaodan Xinghong Racer, which is very similar in terms of the style, stripped down to the bone, very, very minimal, lots of cutouts to save weight, 110 grams here, so going even lighter than the Miro Nude, but the foam here doesn't have that same response. I think it's a TPEE compound, does have a little bit of bounce back, but it's more of a kind of stand-in kind of protection against the road that is also very light. I wouldn't take this past the 5K. I think the foam would kind of over-compress and you'd end up feeling the road more than you wanted to. The Miro Nude is a better shoe, but this is coming in cheaper. I think you can pick this up for as low as $80 on Taobao, maybe around 160 off AliExpress. I'll flash it on the screen just to make sure. But yeah, both of these shoes I think are going to fall victim to durability issues. I've done 2 runs in this now, 2 5K runs, and I can feel the carbon plate coming through the foam. It's kind of compressed in there, and I think that overall it's just not going to last much longer than 100, 150 kilometers based on these first 2 runs. So 2 shoes here which I'm not really going to give any strong recommendations for, but have been quite fun in the rotation. And then the final one is a shoe that I've done one run in, so a bit of a caveat there. It's the Dowin PB Pro, which is probably the most similar shoe that I've felt to the Adidas Evo Pro 1, which I did get to try on in store, did a few kind of little strides around the office just to see what it was about. This reminds me of that small experience very, very much. We've got an uncompressed, what I think is an uncompressed TPEE foam. It's got that same kind of furry feeling to it that the Evo Pro 1 does, where it hasn't been compressed down, it's just been cut straight out of a block of foam. I use this for about 8Ks of threshold running, broken up into a 5K and 3K chunk, and I found this to be one of the most smooth, efficient feeling rides that I've tried. Good bit of bounce back, probably in line with an Adios Pro 3 in terms of the Light Strike Pro, that kind of rubbery rebound. Smooth rocker, very, very light underfoot. Intuitive ride, had a lot of fun in this shoe. This for me would be a nice 10K half marathon racing shoe, whereas the Miro Nude in comparison is going to be a little bit more radical, bit more kind of fun, fast, again, smooth and soft. This is just that little bit more kind of, I guess it has that kind of disappearing feel underfoot, whereas this is a bit more present through your stride. 160 grams for this, 120. I'm not really sure that 40 grams is going to be super noticeable. I think I would prefer to have a bit more guts underfoot and a bit more durability as well. After this first run, I think I'm going to get decent Ks out of this before it really starts to wear down. So yeah, overall the Miro Nude is a bit of a two-sided story, where on one side of things I've had one of the best running experiences ever. Super smooth, super fun, very efficient, very fast. I will cherish every run that I have in this shoe until it does fall apart. 5 and 10K races I think I'm going to use it for. 3K race I'll probably use it as well. But on the other side of things, the durability really does put a bit of a stain on this review. I don't think I can really openly recommend a shoe which is going to fall apart before 100K is guaranteed, but a shoe which looks like this after 25Ks as well. So one side of things, congratulations to 361 Degrees. They've definitely produced something which is fun, exciting, very different as well. They're definitely taking things, you know, taking things on. It's great to see that kind of development, but I do think it does need a few more iterations to get that durability up, because I do think there is a limit, and I think this is probably crossing it right now. So yeah, overall, good stuff, 361 Degrees. I think it does still need some work. I've enjoyed these other shoes as well. Reviews will be coming out for them soon too. Yeah, that's about it.